Around the World Lit Audio. The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. Part 1, Week 2, Chapters 4 to 6, Full Narration Script. Channel Intro. Welcome to Around the World Lit Audio, the greatest novels ever written, from every corner of the world, in English. New chapter every week. Free to listen. Chapter Recap. In Week 1, the devil arrived in Moscow. He appeared at Patriarch's Ponds on a warm spring evening, sitting down beside two literary men, Berlioz, the editor, and Homeless, the poet, and proceeding to tell them that they were wrong about everything. He predicted that Berlioz would lose his head before the evening was out. He told them the story of Pontius Pilate, and the man called Yeshua. And then, as Berlioz stepped onto the tram tracks thinking about sunflower oil, the tram came. The foreigner's name was Woland. He was a professor of black magic. He was, in fact, the devil. Berlioz was dead. Homeless was not. And Moscow was about to become a very strange place. Part 1, Chapters 4 through 6. Part 1, Chapter 4, The Chase. Ivan Nikolaevich Homeless, the poet, the survivor, the man who had been sitting on the bench when the tram came, did what any reasonable person would do after witnessing the decapitation of a colleague at the hands of a supernatural entity. He lost his mind. Or rather, he had not yet lost it, but he was moving in that direction with considerable speed, driven by the particular terror of a man who has seen something that cannot be explained and knows that the only person who can confirm it is the devil himself, who is somewhere in Moscow, and who needs to be found and stopped before he does anything else. Ivan ran. He ran through the streets of Moscow, in the warm spring evening, pushing through crowds, upsetting newspaper stands, drawing the attention of passers-by who saw a wild-eyed young man, running with the purposefulness of someone who is either being chased, or doing the chasing and could not tell which. He was doing the chasing. He had last seen Woland near Patriarch's Ponds, walking away with his two companions, a tall, checkered figure with a cracked pince-nez, and a long nose, and a large black cat walking upright on two legs like a person. He was following this group. He was going to catch them, confront them, expose them. He was a poet and a member of MASSOLIT, and he had a plan, though the plan was somewhat vague on the details. The tall checkered figure was Koroviv. He would become known as Faggot, Woland's first lieutenant, a master of chaos, a creature of pure mockery, who seemed to find everything hilarious and operated with the destructive cheerfulness of someone who has no stake in any outcome except entertainment. The large black cat was Behemoth. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a giant cat, who walked on two legs, spoke fluent Russian, played chess, drank vodka, and had opinions about everything. He was one of the more alarming members of Woland's retinue, not because of his supernatural nature, which was obvious, but because of his manner, which was that of a creature who had observed humanity for a very long time, and found it consistently amusing. Ivan chased them through streets and alleys and courtyards. He lost them. He found them again. He lost them again. The city seemed to rearrange itself around him, familiar streets becoming unfamiliar, distances expanding and contracting in ways that suggested Moscow itself was participating in the game. He ended up at the Moscow River. He did not find Woland. He found, instead, that he had somehow acquired, during his pursuit, a candle in one hand and a small icon of a saint in the other, the provenance of both items being entirely unclear even to himself. He went to the Griboyedov House, the writers' club, MASSOLIT's headquarters, a place of enormous food and modest literature, to report what had happened. Nobody believed him. This was predictable. Ivan arrived disheveled, wild-eyed, clutching a candle and a saint and speaking about the devil at Patriarch's Ponds. The writers of MASSOLIT, who were in the middle of an excellent dinner, regarded him with the polite concern of people who do not wish to be disturbed by inconvenient realities. He was taken, eventually, to a psychiatric hospital. The hospital was calm and clean, and the doctor who received him was professional and kind and entirely certain that Ivan Nikolaevich Homeless had experienced a psychotic break. This was, from the doctor's perspective, the simplest explanation. Ivan was not sure the simplest explanation was the correct one, but he was also very tired, and they gave him an injection that made the urgency of his convictions feel somewhat less urgent, and he lay in his clean white room, and looked at the ceiling and thought about what he had seen. He had seen the devil. He was almost certain. Part 1, Chapter 5, The Incident at Griboyedov. While Ivan was losing his mind in a more or less orderly fashion, the writers of MASSOLIT were losing Berlioz in a more or less disorderly one. The news arrived at Griboyedov House like a stone dropped into still water. First the impact, then the spreading rings. Berlioz was dead. The chairman of MASSOLIT, the editor of the journal, the man who had organized the literary life of Moscow with the efficiency of a small government, dead at Patriarch's Ponds, his head removed by a tram. The reactions were various. Some people were genuinely sorry. Berlioz had been a capable man, whatever his limitations, and capable men are missed when they go. Some people were sorry in the more complicated way of those who are already thinking about what his absence will mean for the distribution of power at MASSOLIT. Some people were sorry in the way that people are sorry when something dramatic happens that they were not present for, sorry to have missed it. And some people, frankly, were hungry. Griboyedov House was famous above all things for its restaurant. The food there was extraordinary by Moscow standards. The cream of mushroom soup, the sterlet in silver saucepan, the grilled fillets of perch, and the writers of MASSOLIT had developed the habit of gathering there in the evenings not so much for literary purposes, as for the pleasures of the table, which were more reliable than the pleasures of literature. The restaurant was full that evening. The death of Berlioz was discussed with appropriate gravity over the cream of mushroom soup. The mystery of Ivan Homeless' breakdown was examined over the perch. By the time the dessert arrived, both subjects had been thoroughly ventilated, and the conversation had moved on to other matters. Then something happened. A jazz band appeared. This was not unusual. Griboyedov had a jazz band, as a matter of course. But this jazz band began to play with an energy and an insistence that was somehow different from the usual background music. The tables began to empty of their literary conversations and fill with dancing. People who had arrived intending to discuss the tragedy of Berlioz found themselves dancing instead, which was perhaps a more honest response to tragedy than most. The dancing escalated, and then the restaurant caught fire. It caught fire suddenly and completely, with the efficiency of a fire that has been waiting for the right moment. The dancers scattered. The food was abandoned. The jazz band played on briefly, then also scattered. The building of Griboyedov House, home of MASSOLIT, center of Moscow's literary life, was burning. Nobody was entirely sure how it had started. Several witnesses reported seeing a figure in a checkered jacket moving through the crowd shortly before the fire began. Several more reported a large black cat. But these were the accounts of people who had been drinking in a restaurant that was on fire, and their reliability was open to question. The fire department came. The fire was extinguished. The restaurant was destroyed. Moscow looked at the smoking ruins of Griboyedov and tried to understand what was happening to it. It was only the beginning. Part 1, Chapter 6, Schizophrenia. As predicted, the psychiatric hospital was peaceful in the way that places are peaceful when they have decided, institutionally, that peace is what they offer. Ivan lay in his room, and the days passed with the measured quietness of a place where time is managed by professionals. He received visitors, doctors, orderlies, the occasional colleague who came to look at him, with the particular expression of people visiting someone in a psychiatric hospital, which combines concern with relief that it is not them. He talked to the doctors. He told them about Patriarch's Pons, about Woland and Koroviv and the Black Cat, about the story of Pontius Pilate, about the tram and the sunflower oil, and the prediction that had come true with such horrible precision. The doctors listened with professional attention and wrote things in their notebooks, and asked questions in the careful, neutral tone of people who have already formed their conclusion, and are gathering supporting evidence. The diagnosis was schizophrenia, or rather, not schizophrenia exactly, but the kind of acute psychotic episode that manifests in the construction of elaborate supernatural explanations for traumatic events. Berlioz's death had been traumatic. Ivan had responded by constructing a narrative in which a supernatural agent was responsible. This was, from a clinical perspective, textbook. Ivan found this explanation unsatisfying. He lay in his room and thought about it. He was fairly certain, schizophrenic. He was also fairly certain that what he had seen had happened. The problem was that these two certainties could not both be true, and he did not know how to hold them simultaneously. He was given medication. He was given meals at regular hours. He was given books to read, which he read without much attention, and he was given the opportunity to walk in the hospital garden, which he took, and he was given, finally, a kind of enforced peace that he had not asked for and that was, against all probability, doing him some good. The urgency of his conviction about Woland faded slightly. Not the conviction itself, he still believed it, with the quiet certainty of someone who has seen something with their own eyes. But the urgency, the need to act on it immediately, to chase through the streets of Moscow, in search of a supernatural entity, that faded. He began to accept that he was in a hospital, that he was going to be in the hospital for some time, and that the devil, if the devil existed, was going to do whatever he was going to do regardless of whether Ivan Homeless was free or confined. This was, in its way, a kind of wisdom. He was in this state of medicated philosophical resignation, when he heard a knock on his window. The knock came from outside, which was unusual because his room was on an upper floor. He looked. There was a man outside the window, a man of about 38, thin, dark-haired, clean-shaven, with brown eyes, that looked at Ivan with the expression of someone who has been in a psychiatric hospital long enough to know the rules, and has decided that the rules apply to other people. The man said, "Good evening." Ivan said, "Good evening." The man said, "I heard you were admitted today. I heard about the business at Patriarch's Pawns. I am very interested. Could we talk?" Ivan looked at him. He said, "Who are you?" The man smiled. He said, "I am a patient here. Like you, I have been here for some time. I have my own room along the corridor. I have managed to acquire a key that opens most of the doors on this floor, which gives me a certain freedom of movement that the staff are not entirely aware of." He said this without apology or embarrassment, simply as a fact about his situation, the way one reports having a comfortable chair or an agreeable view. Ivan asked, "What are you here for?" The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I am here because I wrote a novel about Pontius Pilate. The novel was published and reviewed very badly indeed, in the way that things are reviewed badly when the reviewers have decided the author is to be destroyed rather than simply criticize. After the reviews I burned the manuscript. I had a breakdown. I came here." He said all of this in the calm, level tone of someone describing events that happened to someone else, events that have been examined so thoroughly that they have lost their capacity to cause further pain. Ivan stared at him. He said, "Pontius Pilate." The man said, "Yes. I wrote about Pontius Pilate and Yeshua HaNazri. I wrote about the morning when the procurator of Judea sentenced a wandering philosopher to death and washed his hands of it and spent the rest of his existence paying for the cowardice of that single morning." Ivan felt something shift in his chest. He said, "A stranger told me that story at Patriarch's Pawns, just before my colleague was killed." The man looked at him very carefully. He said, quietly, "What did the stranger look like?" Ivan described Woland. The man was silent for a long time. Then he said, "So he is in Moscow." He said it in the tone of a man who has been expecting something, and has now received confirmation that it has arrived. Ivan said, "You know him?" The man said, "I know of him. I have reason to believe." He paused. "I have reason to believe that he is the one who arranged for my novel to be written in the first place. Or rather, that the story I wrote was not invented, that I was somehow given it. That Pontius Pilate is not a character I created but a man I somehow remembered, or was shown, or was told about by means I cannot explain." He looked at his hands. He said, "My name is the Master. That is what she called me. The woman I loved. She is the only one who ever called me that, and it is the only name I have left that means anything." He did not say her name. He could not, yet, bring himself to say her name. Chapter Transition. You have reached the end of Part 1, Chapters 4 through 6 of The Master and Margarita, by Mikhail Bulgakov. In the next episode, Woland and his retinue settle into an apartment on Sadova Street that has developed a reputation for making its inhabitants disappear. The director of the Variety Theater wakes up to find a stranger in his bedroom, and the chaos that Woland has brought to Moscow begins to spread through the city like a fire, which is, in fact, exactly what some of it is. The next episode is available next week. Subscribe to Around the World Lit Audio so you never miss a chapter. A new episode arrives every week.